if you or someone else right on your teams was interested in this, we'll have that posted on the website along with this slide deck. So just a heads up on that. Just a reminder, right? I mentioned a couple minutes ago, but for those who are just joining, we did post in the chat a link to a form where you can submit your questions, right? We will be rolling from presentation to presentation throughout this meeting here. But if you have questions, you have that form readily available to you. You can take and write down your questions, submit that. We are keeping track of those here behind the scenes, and we will have a Q&A session here at the end. And we're just posting it here again. So, and if it's a question that we don't get to or don't have an answer to right here, we do follow up with a Q&A doc that we'll post most likely in a couple of weeks, right? Once we make sure that we've got all the questions. The other thing is we do keep the form still open here for the rest of the day. So if you have questions that pop up later in the day too, you can still submit them. We'll take them and we'll work on answers for those and get those posted. But all questions will be at the end, and we'll take our time and work through those towards the end of the meeting. Disclaimer up on the screen right now, right? This is the standard one, right? That obviously this is a snapshot in time, right? So what it is we're presenting here is always subject to change over time, but it's for discussion purposes only for this meeting, right? So nothing should be taken or changed or whatnot. But then, with the full understanding that that we work in a very fast-paced, changing environment, right? So things are subject to change. Moving on to the agenda. All right, so the agenda, the first part of it is going to be very similar to what we normally run through, the connection process itself. Where we'll run through the simplified process, screening, expedited, standard, and then a little presentation from our connected customer group, right? The stuff that happens after connection or after interconnection. We're going to talk a little bit about connected solutions with Paul. And then we get into other topics, right? We've added for this specific agenda, right? Around ESS schedules and ramp rates. And then we actually have a little portal update and tutorial, really, to help with some of the changes that have been happening in the portal recently, right? To make sure that everybody still continues to understand how to use it. And so we'll have that. Again, it'll be recorded. We'll have the slide decks. You can come back and refer back to those. A few general communications at the end, right before we dive into the Q&A. So with that, we'll dive into safety moment, as is customary here at National Grid. And it's October, so what are we thinking about Halloween, basically, right? The decorations, the costumes for the kids, and ultimately the trick-or-treating. Right, so this is just around sort of paying attention, right? If you're going to be in your car, I think Halloween's a Sunday this year, so I'm not quite sure when trick-or-treating is going to happen, whether it's going to be on Saturday in some places, Sundays in others. The good news is there won't be a commute really on a weekend, right? But people have their weekend stuff that they're doing. It usually kicks off right after dark, which obviously now you get kids and grown-ups spilling out into the streets, right? If you've got to go to and from home. I know I live in a very heavy trick-or-treating type neighborhood, very difficult to drive down the streets, right? Once trick-or-treating has started. But just keep an eye out and pay attention, especially once it gets dark. And just those at the very end, like the COVID obviously still a thing here on Halloween number 2, right? Just try to find ways to deliver the candy to the kids without creating more exposure, right? We had shoots last year, right? You could be handing out the candy with a glove on versus having kids come and stick their hands in and pulling things out and getting too close. So just kind of keep all that kind of stuff in mind. One more slide before we kick off the real presentation. Just want to talk about COVID and force majeure. and kind of where we stand now as part of National Grid. Not much has changed since March of last year when it comes to the force majeure notification posted at the end of March 2020. The good news is resource-wise, we're pretty much back to normal, right? We're working as close to blue sky as we possibly can. The issues we were running into are more supply chain issues, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are running into the same sort of stuff, right? Whether it's in your personal life or work, right? The supply chain issues still do exist, and if those do pop up, right, we do identify a specific force majeure for that project. We will notify you if there's going to be any specific impacts, but the blanket COVID-related force majeure is still in effect. So with that, we can jump into our simplified presentation with Jesse. Just a reminder, right? Do your best, stay on mute. Right, I'm going to turn my camera off now. Looking for everybody else to turn and leave their cameras off for the presentation, and we'll be sort of rolling through with questions being submitted through the form and being addressed at the end. But Jesse, I will hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Good morning, everyone. My name is Yesenia Rosa. You could call me Jesse. I am the simplified process lead here with CEI on the ADT team, application development team. Next slide, please. I'm going to go ahead and go through the simplified process with everyone. So on this slide, the simplified criteria consist of the UL listed inverter-based systems with power ratings of 15 kW or less on a single phase service on a radial feed, or a UL listed inverter-based system with power ratings of 25 kW or less on a three-phase service on a radial feed. The simplified process does not apply for non-listed inverters or generators, aggregate generation capacity of listed inverters that exceed the above mentioned limits, or projects that do not pass the simplified process screens. Next slide, please. The interconnection process steps consist of the application, in this case would be a simplified application, the conditional approval step in the process of the case. At that point, if it is a mass smart case, a service work order does populate on the forms for that case. And then it also consists of the completion document step, and at the end you have your ATI email that goes out once the meter is set. Next slide, please. The path for the simplified review consists of the timeframes consist of the following. As soon as you draft up your case and submit it, you get an email response that basically acknowledges your case has been submitted. Then we have 10 days to review that case and either provide a conditional approval or place that case on hold if there is some discrepancies. And then we go down to the completion documents stage and the ATI stage. Next slide, please. Some common holds and concerns when it comes to the simplified process and the application consist of the following. The application must match the customer's account name, address, account number, and meter number on the bill. Don't forget to include the account number and meter numbers on the application. Sometimes we do see applications coming in and it'll have all the information except for those two items. In the application roles, be sure to enter in the customer's email address. It's important that we do capture that email address in the event that we have to reach out to the customer. Let's say there's a discrepancy on the case. We need to reach out to the customer and notify them. So that email address is important there. The customer billing account should be up to date and all obligations met and or cleared. And please wait for the conditional approval to be issued to construct the system. That has to do a lot with the checking of the transformer, making sure that everything regarding the transformer is going to be okay once, for that system to be constructed there. Once conditional approval is granted, we do find that the service upgrade form for Mass Smart cases do not get filled out. So it is important to go back into that case and to fill out that service upgrade form. That way there you can obtain that work order immediately. We do process the service upgrade forms within 24 to 48 hours when you submit them. So if you do go in there and actually fill in the form in the case, it makes it easier for us to actually obtain that work order for you immediately versus uploading an actual form. If you upload a form, it takes probably 24 to 48 hours to get a work order number, where if you do it on the case, it comes up immediately. And then at completion documents, just a reminder to have the wire inspector clear the inspection on that Mass Smart work order or an upgrade work order if you are doing some other upgrades to the service on top of installing the solar. And if you do have a Mass Smart case, don't forget that after ATI, it is not over there. You still do have to submit those payment forms to Clear Result so that the customer could get paid. Next slide, please. So in the event that you do submit a simplified case and it gets moved to expedited, some of the reasons might be if during the infrastructure review it is determined that the proposed system will exceed the recommended electrical capacity of the service transformer, then the two options are reduce the system size to be within the capacity remaining on the transformer, or resubmit the application as an expedited through the expedited process. And there will be an expedited fee associated with that if it does get moved to expedited. The expedited process does include a more comprehensive technical review. The technical review may identify National Grid system modifications that are required to interconnect your system, and the cost of system modifications are the responsibility of the interconnecting customer. Next slide, please. This is just a slide to show you on your case, when you do have a Mass Smart case and a work order is issued, you could go into your case and you go onto the related tabs and you're able to see the work order number as well as if the inspection has been completed within the system. Next slide, please. Some common questions and concerns for residential storage. Both the solar and AC coupled storage are included in the system size when determining if the system will be simplified or expedited. Storage is not included in the size for net metering. For example, if a 10 kW single phase or single phase solar system with a 7 kW of AC storage, it would have followed the expedited process because it's over 15 kW. However, it would still be net metering because we would only count that 10 kW towards the net metering cap. If in mass, the storage with net metered solar that charges from the grid cannot export to the grid. So it is important to note this on the one lines when you do install with a battery, if the battery is charging from the grid. But note that if it cannot charge from the grid, a no on the one line is required. And if the system is participating in Mass Smart, all generation must be captured by the Mass Smart meter. Next slide. Some process and end of year reminders. So when entering your case at the triage questions for the submittal of the case, it asks for a kWAC generator size. On that section, you want to be sure to just enter your generator kWAC size. Do not include the battery. If you do have a battery on that system that is AC coupled, do not include that rating along with the generator rating on this section. Once you enter in your generator kWAC capacity here, it will then ask if there's a battery, and at that point, then you'll be able to enter the rating for the batteries there. For simplified cases, we have created a list of contacts depending on the part of the process that you're at, and we do have a guidance page on the external web page for you guys that shows how to chatter on the case, and it also has the contact list for all simplified representatives, and depending on what process of that case you are in, you would chat a different representative. So for example, in the event that you are at completion documents and you have a question regarding the inspection, the representative that you would most likely chatter on that case for that question would be Matt Beatty, because he is the one who processes our completion documents. So there is a link both here on this slide and on the guidance pages that show you these contacts. If you are enrolled in the Mass Smart, do not forget, oh, back please. Oh, thank you. If you are enrolled in the Mass Smart, do not forget the process does continue through the Clear Result portal for the submittal of the payment forms for the customers to receive their Mass Smart incentives. And a couple of end of year bullets. We are getting close, so don't forget to submit all your closeout documents by the first week of December to ensure that we do grant the ATI by December 31st. And with the winter season coming, keep in mind that our meter workers do need a clear to the meter. So if there's some debris, bushes, snow, we ask that that is cleared out of the access to the meter so our meter workers could get to it. And I think we are done. That is all for simplified process. Thank you, everyone. I will be passing it on to JJ George. Thank you.
Thanks, Jesse. Good morning. Covering briefly the pre-application, application, and screening review processes with you all this morning. Next slide, please. So pre-applications are required for any system 250 kilowatts or greater. To submit a pre-app, we require 4 basic things: the proposed site location address, aggregate system size, the generation type, whether it's solar, CHP, wind, hydro, and an uploaded screenshot using any web mapping platform like Google Maps, Bing, the assessor's map. Pre-application reports are completed within 10 business days. National Grid provides circuit information, including feeders, substation name, phase, if the area is in a network or non-network area, potential system constraints, application checklist, and the connected and pending aggregate DG on the feeders. Next slide, please. So this is what a finalized pre-application report looks like. It's 5-6 pages. It provides a lot of beneficial information for the proposed system site, including some of the things I mentioned before, like the feeder circuit information, constraints, challenges, the capacity of the DG of the feeders in the area to host DG, the nearest feeders. The second page details additional notes about the distribution system in the area, and they can include there's an ongoing study, if there's what type of challenges, and other important information to help make a better decision in moving forward to the application stage. Next slide, please. This is the third page of the pre-application finalized report. It includes like all the interconnection requirement links, like the ESB 750 for electrical installation standards, 756 for parallel generation requirements, interconnection docs, processes. When applying for any interconnection, either during the application or pre-app, this page has a ton of helpful links. That includes all the tariff information, posted capacity maps, and those things like that. So next slide, please. The final last 3 pages of the pre-application report cover the application checklist. It's a little tough to see in the slide, but it's very detailed checklist that outlines what forms and documents are required for each type of project. It's listed by size and the generation type. It also details where in the tariff or standards you can find additional details for those required documents. Following this checklist prevents a lot of the holds that we see during the application review process. Slide, please. So once the pre-app's finalized and all of the application submittals are finalized and we start reviewing the interconnection application, this is what the process looks like when going through. Once all of those items on the application review checklist are filled out and submitted, the review will be completed within 10 business days. All submissions require a completed application form, application fee, billing account number, system size, equipment assets, account location, site plan, line diagram, site control documentation if required, and the legal information documents. Larger projects could require additional forms, including UL certificates, load projection over voltage letters, ESS narratives, and things like that. Next slide, please. Some of the commonly missed items leading to application review holds are the billing account number. Either it was omitted on the application form or it wasn't added to the legal information form sometimes when it's required. The construction work request number was never obtained. LROV letters, anti-islanding forms, curtailment letters if you're going to derate any of the inverters. Some of the things that we see on one lines that are missing are inverter and interrupting device nameplate rating, relay settings. Same with the DG protective device settings. One lines won't have a PE stamp from an electrical engineer. Some of the things we see on site plans are omitting the point of interconnection or the point of common coupling, the company pole nearest the proposed PCC, and then the access short notes that include the minimum of 20 feet wide dimension for necessary clearance requirements. Slide, please. The ESP 75060 covers basically all the internet connection requirements, and these are some of the most frequently asked questions about what we allow and what we don't allow, what we can provide and what we can't. So the company, National Grid, will not provide any transformers larger than 300 kVA, or when primary metering is the least cost to serve option. All commercial meters and disconnects need to be grouped together. Existing metering location on a pad-mounted transformer will be required to be relocated when applying for new standalone DG systems. New MA smart meter installations require disconnecting means on both the line and load side of the meter. And then all final metering locations will be determined by the metering department and will be based upon existing service configurations. And then for metering department, it's always helpful to reach out, which is when you need that service work request number before the process begins. That way you can schedule an appointment, meet out with them, and then finalize the configuration of where you want to set up your system with them. That way there's no holdups later on in the process. All expedited cases that need further study will need all the documentation required for standard projects. And work should not begin, which I already said, until the metering department has approved final disconnect and meter locations on site with the electrician. So the screening process is always required for expedited and standard projects. Expedited projects require screening review to be completed within 25 business days. Standard projects require an initial review to be completed within 20 days. Some of the things that we check during screenings on a project, if it's a radial or network system, if the equipment is UL 1741 SA listed, if the proposed service configuration will work for the project, does the proposed DG system pass substation backfeed and islanding screenings? If any of those checkpoints fail, we typically require additional study before providing an ISA. Any projects on a network or non-effectively grounded system will require further detailed study. These are some of the potential system constraints that typically lead to further study, which could be challenging feeders, hosting capacity, feeder reconfigurations, ungrounded feeders, non-effectively grounded feeders and HT lines, planned substation work, feeder saturation, and DG penetration. And that's it for the pre-app, app, and screening process. I will turn this over to Mr. Armel.
I am on the app development team.
Hey, Mike,
Next.
it's Will. Just want to make sure you're okay.
Yeah, can you hear me, Will?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, next, so if you didn't hear me, I apologize. My name is Mike Armel, and I am on the ADT team, and I do handle expedited projects, so I apologize. I thought I was off mute. So for our expedited criteria of our projects, expedited cases would contain single-phase customers with listed single-phase inverters, base systems with power ratings greater than 15 kW on a radio feed, as well as three-phase customers with listed three-phase inverter base systems with power ratings of greater than 25 kW on a radio feed. Also, any projects that do not pass the simplified process screens, they would become expedited at that time. Non-simplified projects that do not require an impact study would also be expedited. Maximum size of supplemental review is based on the review of the screens. Next slide. So the interconnection process steps for expedited projects. If the project is greater than 250 kW, we would start with the pre-application. From there, in the application world, the application will be submitted for an expedited case and reviewed. At that point, I would review, or the screening team would review all of the forms. They would then go to screening. If further supplemental review is needed, it would go through distribution design for a supplemental review. At the completion of that, those either or situation, we would deliver an ISA with conditional approval and the approval to construct the DG system. If there's any payments required, we would begin construction once those payments are received. Can there be construction on National Grid side? Typically on expedited cases, we will not go through the witness test process. We'll use the commissioning memo in lieu of the witness test. And then in both cases, we would then go through the completion document review and have the meter set. Once that's been completed and if registration has been completed, we would then deliver the authorization to interconnect. Next slide. So the expedited review path for our the eligible facilities for the listed inverter, we do acknowledge receipt automatically. It's 3 business days, but when your application is submitted, we will send that email to you. We then have the 10 business days to go through the application and make sure there's no issues with the forms. If we have any issues, we'll let you know, put it on hold, and then continue once everything's back in order. At that point, it would go to screening. It's a 25 business day turnaround for screens. If any screens are not passed, the company may require a supplemental review agreement before providing an interconnection service agreement. Key threshold is if the aggregate generation is less than 67% of the minimum load on the feeder. Other screens review voltage quality, reliability, and safety to reduce the potential need for impact studies. Relay control system must be well defined to make supplemental review easier. So if supplemental review is required, that's 20 business days with our distribution design engineers to get to the ISA. We then would create an ISA on my side. This is a 10 business day turnaround. So between the 2 types of projects, whether a expedited case does not need a supplemental review, it would be 45 business days. If it does, it's 65 business days. Your construction schedule will vary based on your own construction schedule, as well as permitting, easements, and inspections. The witness test would be 10 days, within 10 business days of receiving the COC. However, the bulk of these projects are handled with the commissioning memo in lieu, and we would handle that during the regular completion document checklist review. Next slide. The common errors in completion documents. For most expedited applications, a commissioning memo and on-company letterhead is provided in lieu of the witness test. The commissioning memo should consist of the following: the 2-second shutdown when the disconnect is open test, as well as 5 minutes before restart when the disconnect is closed test. We have to confirm that the system matches the as-built. So we want to have an as-built with the most recent revision with the date listed on that, agreeing with the commissioning memo and the as-built. So same signer, same date. List the inverter relay frequency and trip time settings. So insert that table as well on the commissioning memo. The as-built must be PE stamped and signed and dated by the person that performed the commissioning test. So they have to agree. For photos, pictures, we want to see a picture of the meter and showing the permanent plaque visible at eye level that includes a warning about the generator installed. Also for the AC utility disconnect switch, we want that labeled there. If it is not grouped and adjacent to the utility revenue meter, we require a placard visible at eye level that clearly identifies the location of the AC utility disconnect. For projects greater than 60 kW Massachusetts, we do require evidence of insurance. So you can refer to the ISA as well as the tariff for some of the specifics to your project and the size of your project for the insurance requirements, but all projects will require that form to get the interconnection ATI. For qualifying facilities, the documents that we do require are the Schedule A. Greater than 60 kW, we'll want the W9, the ACH, the supplier enrollment form, and then we will continue with the asset registration as well for projects greater than 60 kW, and then ATI will be delivered. A meter reminder, projects greater than 60 kW in mass require interval metering, wireless or phone line. We do prefer, at least the metering department does prefer the wireless connection. If the company needs a 4G wireless signal test on a Verizon network in order to provide the wireless metering. So on that test form, please show the strength of the signal, and we can verify that. If there is a problem with the signal there and a phone line is required, it must be dedicated and terminated at the meter location. It must be 100% copper. Fiber lines do not communicate properly. These meters are long lead time items, as you know, and prep time can be 10 to 12 weeks. So it's important to work with this with your job owner as well in advance when you intend to seek authority to interconnect. The wireless test form is available in a few places. I think JJ had that link as well as here. So Michelle will handle the standard process review. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Good morning, everyone. My name is Michelle Bolduck, and I'm an account manager for Standard Projects post ISA, and I will be going over the standard review process. Next slide. There are specific criteria for a project to fall under the standard process. Those requirements include projects greater than 500 kW, projects that require distribution system impact studies and/or substation system modifications, any non-listed inverters or generators other than PV, such as induction, synchronous, asynchronous, most CHP systems, and any project that did not qualify for simplified or expedited process. There are quite a few steps that make up the interconnection process, starting with the pre-application. The customer will then submit the application. At this point, it'll be determined if it will be a standard project. Next, we move on to the engineering review, which will include the impact study and detailed study if applicable. Once the study is complete, the project will move forward into this interconditional approval. National Grid will deliver the interconnection service agreement, and the customer will sign. The project will progress over to design. The designer will complete the design along with documentation for any pre-construction requirements. Pre-construction work for a project is sometimes required. This can include items such as environmental reviews, permitting, easements, etc. Construction only begins after pre-construction work is complete. Once construction is finished and all necessary inspections are cleared, we move on to witness testing. A customer will submit their witness test docs, and a date will be scheduled for the testing. At this point, the customer should have also submitted completion documents and photos. Assuming the witness test is successful, we go and install the meter, National Grid will register the assets, and finally issue ATI. The link below provides a more detailed outline of the interconnection process. And next slide. Here we listed some important tariff timelines that make up the standard review path. Acknowledgement receipt of application is 3 days. Review application for completeness is 10. Complete standard process initial review is 20. We typically send the impact study agreement in 5 days. And for impact study, it can range between 55 to 60 or by mutual agreement dependent on complexity. Similarly, with the detailed study, 30 to 60 days or by mutual agreement depending on complexity. The executable ISA goes out in 15 days, and the total maximum days that you can expect is 135, 160 if it begins as expedited, 200 days or more if standard complex. Construction schedules do vary because construction scope is job specific. We schedule the witness test 10 days after the company has approved the witness test documents or by mutual agreement, and we will review the witness test results 5 days post witness testing. Next slide. Some reminders of what can be expected along the standard review path. Impact study and detailed study determine the electrical impact on the company's EPS with the required system modifications and associated costs. If a project is greater than 1 megawatt, customer applications will be presented to ISO-NE at the 20 business day mark of the impact study, and the study will go on an ASO hold until the ISO-NE provides approval and or the ASO study, if required, is complete. Project size is based on nameplate rating of system and can be aggregated. An application would be a GNF if it was greater than 1 megawatt or less than 5 megawatt and does not require a full transmission study, versus if a project is greater than 5 megawatt and or requires a full transmission study, it would be needing a PPA and a supporting TPPA. If substation modifications are required, company has 60 business days for study. If estimated construction costs are greater than 1 million, study timelines could be by mutual agreement. However, the customer would be notified at the 20 business day review if there was an impact to their timeline. The ISA will have the estimated construction timeline and is provided after the study is complete. If detailed study is required, the customer may request an early ISA, but it will not include a construction timeline and will begin the payment timeline. An important thing to note is the first kayak payment is due within 60 business days rather than the previous 120, and kayak payments no longer have the 30-day cure period and will be withdrawn after the payment due date has passed. Design begins only after the first kayak payment has been made and will determine the details of system modifications, such as location of proposed equipment. Easements, permitting, environmental reviews, etc., begin after design is complete and are required to move into construction. If third parties do not agree to the design, it can result in a restudy or redesign. And next slide. Some additional reminders around witness testing and completion documents. You can refer to the link to the portal for the most up-to-date checklist. Documents can be approved in advance of construction complete, but documents must be submitted in their entirety before the review can begin. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to your account manager. Reminders specifically around witness testing. When submitting the witness test documents, please include pictures of the nameplate ratings. The witness test cannot be scheduled until the company and customer construction is complete. This includes all inspections, all witness test documents are approved by National Grid Engineering. Reminders specifically around compliance documents. Asset registration is part of compliance documents. National Grid will register the assets on behalf of the customer, which can take typically 5 to 10 business days. Because we cannot backdate payments, incentive projects greater than 60 kW require asset registration with ISO before ATI can be granted. Behind the meter class 2 and 3, net metering and demand response systems are exempt from being registered as settlement-only generators with ISO. If AC battery standalone system is generating power to the grid, it also needs to be registered separately with ISO. And next slide. These are just some reminders around document revisions and restudies. Please make sure all changes to customer submitted documents are clouded and the revision block is updated. This ensures that National Grid captures all changes and that we are also referencing the most up-to-date document. Per our standards, one-lines and site plans need to have the PE stamp. And if you're making changes after the study has been finalized, the customer needs to inform National Grid of changes via the change request button on the portal and provide revised documents to determine if a restudy would be necessary. Restudies will have associated study costs and timelines separately, and restudies can cause impacts to project costs and timelines, even if the scope of work is not changing. Typically, we see an increase to both, especially if the previous study is over a year old. Design and construction will be put on hold while we determine if a restudy is required and for the duration of the restudy if it is needed. The project timeline will continue once the ISA amendment has been signed. And keep in mind, rework may be needed and determined after full execution of the respective amendment. And next slide. As we approach the end of the year, it's important to plan for projects anticipating an end-of-year interconnection. Below are some important target dates to help ensure that an end-of-year interconnection is as likely as possible. Witness test documents and the wireless meter test form or meter phone number should be submitted by October 1st. Note that witness test documents were updated as of last May. Construction should be complete by November 15th. At this point, all outstanding documentation should also be submitted. Again, documentation packages must be submitted in full for National Grid to review and approve. It's also beneficial if you check that all images are properly labeled, clear, and uploaded in their proper forms on the portal. And this year, December 31st is a company observed holiday and therefore not a processing day. These target dates give us a higher likelihood of making an end-of-year interconnection. These dates have been established based on experience with end-of-year delays, such as engineering reviews, as well as subsequent reviews and revisions as necessary to achieve the interconnecting customer's compliance with the requirements, queuing and resource allocation for both witness test scheduling and meter installations, fewer processing days due to holidays and inclement weather, required registration with ISO-NE for projects over 1 megawatt that must be processed prior to ATI, and interconnecting customer delays in starting the registration process in a timely manner. Please keep in mind that the company will not issue ATI until interconnecting customer has satisfied all interconnection requirements, such as wiring inspections, compliance documentation, the witness test, ISO-NE registration, and the company meter is installed. And additional information can be found in the link below. And again, don't hesitate to reach out to your account manager. Thank you. And moving on to Lorna for her section.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Hello?
Yep.
Yes. Okay, great. Thanks. Hi, everyone. Lorna Burnett, and I am a senior specialist with the ER Connected Customer Group, and I'll be reviewing how to best contact us and where to find our allocation sheets. Next slide, please. So what is DER customer support? So we are part of the Customer Energy Integration Department, and our vision is to make it easy to be a customer with connected distributed energy resources as it is to be a traditional National Grid customer. Our purpose is to prepare National Grid for a time when more than half of our customers have DER equipment or participate in a DER incentive program. Managing and improving user experience is the National Grid Customer Application Portal. And managing and improving business processes, communications, customer requests for National Grid customers hosting connected DER equipment or participating in a DER incentive program. Next slide. Who can submit connected customer requests? So we have the system owner, which would be the interconnecting customer, the host customer, who would be the billing customer. And there's also third parties, designated third parties who oversee the site or operations or accounts for the system owner or host customer. And how do I know if my project is connected? I think that there's a little bit of confusion sometimes. People think that just because the panels are on the roof, that means their project is connected. There are certain criteria that need to be met and which have been reviewed previously. If your application has received authority to interconnect and all of the following that apply would mean your project is connected. The project has been fully registered with ISO New England. A first bill on a host account with net metering or smart AOBC credits applied, and the refund or invoice for reconciling system modification costs have been paid. After all of the above criteria met, support would be handled by the DER Connected Customer Group. And an exception would be if you're replacing or adding equipment to your site, you need to submit a new application with the existing equipment clearly marked on the one-line diagram. Next page. To submit an inquiry to the Connected Customer Group, we've provided the following link and a screenshot of the page that would come up. So I think first thing would be to check the post-interconnection folder. There's various different knowledge pages, links in there, FAQs that would be helpful prior to actually submitting the inquiry to us. So some of your answers can be resolved by just checking that post-interconnection knowledge pages. To actually submit the inquiry to us, you would want to click on the Contact Us link, provide all the information, including the attachments. You can provide up to 5 attachments. And then once you hit submit, you'll receive an email confirming submission, and National Grid will then process your request and reply to you with any additional questions or timelines. Next slide. So where to find the allocation change forms? As I mentioned, you can go into the attached link here, which would be the National Grid Application Portal. Go to Post Interconnection. Next slide. You would hit on Massachusetts and Post Interconnection, and then you can scroll down to Massachusetts Credit Allocation Change Request or Inquiry. Once you're on that page, the credit allocation change request, you'll find net metering for simple residential, net metering for complex, Mass Smart net metered, and Mass Smart AOBC. We are in the process of sending out an email to announce that we are using our discretion to raise the frequency to 4 times per calendar year for complex. I'm sorry, for 4 times per calendar year. For complex, we have actually initiated a new form that can be found under the complex under net metering. So there's a Schedule Z form as well as the Schedule Z Excel form. And just to reiterate, so these Schedule Z one-time transfers, AOBC allocation changes can all be submitted 4 times per calendar year, and we will be rolling out additional communications. Next slide. Just a little clarification on Schedule Zs and also one-time transfer requests. So a Schedule Z can be updated 4 times per calendar year. It's designated to be changing the allocation of excess generation credits on your account. Requests are made as percentages, which will be based on the generation per month. And be sure to choose how you would like your net metering credits allocated by selecting one of the options in section E, and that's on page 2 of the Schedule Z. On page 3 is where you'll be providing your designation by percentage. So you would have to put all the information in there, including the account number, name, address, account number of the person that you would like to receive your excess generation. Page 4, we need an updated signature and date. For the one-time transfer request, same situation. It can be updated 4 times per calendar year. It is used to transfer excess credit balance from your account to another account on a one-time basis. And this must meet the MA load zone requirements and be transferred to a National Grid Electric account. There is a link on the website for the Mass Load Zone if you wanted to consult that. The request needs to be made in dollar amount versus a percentage and up to the amount that is available at the time of processing as an excess credit. And page 4 again requires a signature and a date. Next page. Some of the topics from the drop-down menus when you're going to submit an inquiry to at the contact us link. For DG billing inquiries, it would be questions regarding why I haven't received my bill, why am I getting multiple bills? Sometimes we need to cancel and rebill if we're adding different components to your account, or I don't see my incentive credits. For the credit allocation inquiries, it would be how do I change my allocations? I don't know my meter number. Why haven't the transfers gone out? And can I get a transfer history? Transfer ownership would be if you're buying or selling a home and just have questions about that. Complex projects usually reach out directly in the parent case. There is a power quality and high voltage topic, and that would be I'd like to expand my system. What are the steps? We're seeing constant spikes in our data. How can we resolve it? Our generation is not matching your generation. Our project is tripping offline several times a week. How do we resolve it? And so somebody would actually, for the power quality and high voltage, we do respond to those immediately. So if there's an urgent matter going on, please put that into the power quality high voltage. Credit allocation change requests are just those. You would be submitting the forms, uploading them to that portal inquiry form. Other post-interconnection inquiries would be, I need to update my mailing address. I need to change the email address on file, my phone number, etc. And then we've recently just added system terminated or decommissioned. So I think that's that for us. But if you have any questions, you can certainly, just send in a general information. If you have a question about anything, we will respond. And next is Connected Solutions.
Hello. Next slide, please. So I just want to give you guys a quick heads up of 2 incentive programs that you might not know about. So this is after you've interconnected your solar or storage, or really just solar and storage. We have 2 programs that will pay you additional incentives for allowing us to have some control over those distributed energy resources. One program is for, I only have one slide. So one program is for solar inverters, where customers can earn $25 for every enrolled site and $20 a year for staying in the program. And what National Grid will do is we'll change the solar inverter settings to improve power quality on the grid, but we will not impact in any way solar generation. So it's a complete win for customers. And the other one is a battery program, which has pay for performance incentives. Larger batteries make more money, but a typical residential battery makes about $1,500 a year. In a typical commercial battery, it's more like $40,000 a year. And what National Grid will do is we'll call on that battery to discharge when the system is at peak, relieving peak load on the grid. I know that was really fast, but please, in the meeting notes, follow this link to learn more about the program. And also in that URL, you can find the contact information for me if you have any questions. Thanks. Bye.
Hi, this is Ryan Constable. I'm a manager of distribution planning at National Grid. I'm going to talk about battery operating schedules and ramp rates. Next slide. So as a result of the large volume of both in number and size of battery applications, National Grid took a sort of a new approach to studying these, and it has some relation to the analysis we did last year in Central and Western Massachusetts related to the group studies. And for those who don't know, when we completed the group studies, we had high per megawatt per kilowatt interconnection costs. And as a result of those high interconnection costs, the developers did not progress to completion or proceed with any of the projects, right? So we know that we can't just study these things in sort of an unconstrained manner because the interconnection costs are too high and nobody can tolerate those high interconnection costs. So we needed a new way to study these batteries so that they reduce they either don't create or reduce investment costs and basically try, is there a way we can study them so that they actually help the system, right? Maybe they enable DG and maybe they enable load, right? So so basically the purpose of the batteries, as we all know, is to shift energy from periods of high generation to periods of high load. And then in consultation with a variety of the developers, it was agreed that we would study these batteries so that we would avoid new infrastructure investments, right, to control those costs like I talked about before. And then within the majority of the locations within National Grid's territory, we have high solar generation penetrations, and so therefore the solar generation drives the periods of high generation, right, which is basically the morning and then into the early afternoon. If you look at the top chart on this slide, that is National Grid's sort of charge and discharge windows, and these are under very active discussions right now, but those are our charge and discharge windows. And then I posted the clean peak charging windows. You're just going to look at the solar-based column to the right in that middle table, and then there's the discharge window at the bottom per the clean peak standards. And you're going to see that there's lots of alignment between the National Grid charge and discharge windows and those clean peak, simply because it's tied to it's roughly tied to the same thing, right? It's tied to when the solar generation is generating and then when the peak occurs on the system, right? So the National Grid charge and discharge windows have a little bit of a nuance because it's tied to the local, it's sort of a more granular approach, and it's tied to the local issues and the distribution issues. So as a result of this, we did developer specific tests, right? So for each feeder, for each developer, we studied the battery under this charge and discharge window, trying to avoid infrastructure investments and coming up with the maximum allowable battery size or the maximum allowable charge or discharge factors we could provide. And that basically brings us to today. And again, this is under very active conversations. Next slide. And this is basically why we wanted to add a little bit, explain, sort of the underlying analysis and explain why this is important. So here's just an unconstrained example. So I know that these charts are hard to read, but all you're going to absorb is you're going to look at the gray line in the middle, and you're going to look at the gray line in relation to the blue top line, and the bottom orange line. So the blue line consider the forward power limit, and then the orange line is just its mirror image that in reverse power. So the top one just shows what the load is doing generally. Lots of space between the blue and the orange in this particular case, right? That's not always the case. Then I added load. So the second chart has load and PV, right? So if you were to zoom in, you'd see that the load line has gone down somewhat, but not exactly, because in some cases the PV does not reduce the load in the evening hours. And then you see that the PV goes starts to operate towards the reverse power line. And then the bottom line shows the unconstrained battery, right? So now with an unconstrained battery, basically all the capacity of the circuit is filled up, and you have overloads in both directions. All right, so that battery is not operating in a way that actually helps the local system. It's actually harming the local system, right? So that's what the unconstrained battery does. Now, next slide. And now we're just going to zoom in on a couple periods to sort of elaborate on what I just said. So if you look at the top chart, we're doing two different cases now. We're looking at discharge separately from charge, right? So let's pretend that the battery can charge whenever it wants. That's the top chart. And then if you pretend that the battery can charge whenever it wants, that's the bottom chart. Okay, so on the top chart, you're going to look at the difference between the gray and the green line, where the gray line is with the battery and the green line is just load and PV. So in the red box, you see that this is towards the orange line, the reverse power line. You see that the battery is using up basically the generation space. It's adding to the generator. Okay, and then in the blue box, you see that the battery is reducing the load, right? So the red box is basically hurting the system, where the blue box is helping the system, right? And then if you zoom in, you're going to see that discharge window is basically the evening hours into the nighttime hours, right? And batteries probably are not going to discharge into the nighttime hours, but that's when it actually helps the system. When the battery subtracts from whatever the system happens to be doing, the battery needs to subtract from that condition, and then the battery is helping the system. And then if you look at the bottom chart and the charge, again, the blue, so now the battery, you're looking at the difference between the gray and the yellow, where the gray line is with the battery. So now the battery is reducing the generation, or you could even say enabling more generation, where when it's charging. And then when it charges at night in the red, that's actually hurting the system, right? Because it's gonna start creating overloads, and it uses up that spare capacity. Okay, next slide. And then this just highlights that charge again and shows what the real problem is. So the real problem is that as you use up the capacity, or actually if the batteries act as adders instead of subtractors, then they're using up the capacity like I talked about, but it also creates major operational and reliability issues for the distribution system. So the control centers basically need to understand, like, let's say we let this happen, right? Then the control centers need to have an inventory of every battery on every circuit, the possible charge and discharge schedules of every battery on every circuit. And at any time, as they make each decision, they need to basically incorporate all the possible battery operating modes before they make any decision, right? So that's just unmanageable right now for the utility to do. So you can't rearrange the system now for reliability reasons. You can't rearrange the system under contingency emergency conditions. So so just simple day-to-day operations become untenable with unconstrained batteries. And that's basically my last slide. And the one last point I wanted to make on the operating schedules is this is actually happening now. So there are conditions, right, not with batteries, but with PV, where we're having trouble reconfiguring our system for normal operation reasons as a result of the penetration of distributed generation and so forth, right? So it's not even a theoretical thing, it's a real thing and it's happening now. Okay, the next topic is ESS ramp rate. And so now for this one, we know that the battery developers want to participate in some of the wholesale markets in this regulation market. And when they do so, they need to, this regulation market is is ISO New England making very rapid calls to change, megawatt outputs very dramatically, right? So you go from full charge to full discharge over, basically seconds. So the problem is that when you participate in that market through the distribution system, you can actually harm the distribution system. And when you harm the distribution system, you're harming the customers that are along the way, right? So we do what's called a flicker analysis, which is basically a rapid voltage analysis. And people have probably been subject to this in their possible histories, right? So when their lights start flickering in the house, when there's a storm coming, or there might even be a flicker that happens in relation to a large industrial customer that's nearby, right? And then of course, it's not tolerable and the utility has to fix it. Okay, so now with these batteries and the fact that they're so large, and the distribution system was never designed to handle resources like this, participating in a wholesale market, there's big issues, right? So we cannot, we can't allow the batteries to go from full charge to full discharge over just a second. So we did an analysis. We looked at the limits of our system, so that we could provide some consistency to the market, and more importantly, so that we could maintain the operability of our circuit, of our system, and and basically the safety of our system. And we arrived at a 2.6% per second ramp rate. So this is actually pretty substantial, right? It's actually a pretty high ramp rate. I know that for some developers it's not high enough, but it's actually higher than the ISO New England minimum requirements. And this is important because we do need the ability to reconfigure our system like I talked about before, and we would not be able to do so if we gave customized ramp rates, right? So if we gave a specific battery developer, say a 50% ramp rate, which is incredibly high, and that wouldn't, I'm just using that as an example, but say we gave them a 50% ramp rate, and then we needed to reconfigure that system and move that battery developer to a new feeder, we would not be able to guarantee that they could have a 50% ramp rate on the new feeder. Now, when that happens, that battery developer has an ISA, we understand that. And so then is the company responsible for ensuring that that battery developer does get the 50% and has to build all the infrastructure? And because this is an impedance-based, a resistance-based phenomenon, the infrastructure investment would be substantial, right? So instead of creating that trap for all of us, National Grid decided that we would study our system and figure out what the distribution system can handle, on a conservative basis, and then we're going to state that that's the allowable ramp rate for all batteries. And that's it. Oh, and so, well, let's go back to the charts. So I just wanted to show these charts. So this just dives into the analysis a little bit. And so it's just the IEEE 1453 flicker curves. And this is, for those who are familiar with it, it's the line of irritation, right? So this is the line that where if it goes above, then the customers are irritated, right? And you guys can dive into the documents themselves to understand that particular term. But I'm just showing you two example graphs, 2.6% on the top, and then there's no violations. It does not go over the line of irritation. And then 2.9% is just an example graph where I'm showing you that it does go above the line of irritation. And And then the other point behind the 2.9% is to just demonstrate that we iterated on a decimal percentage basis to find the optimal allowable ramp rate, right? I'm just showing you 2.9 because you can see it over the chart, right? If you went to 2.7, 2.8, it would also be over, but it's harder to see. That's it.
Hello, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, Marissa.
Awesome. Good afternoon. My name is Marissa Soretti, and I am the New England Portal Specialist for the DER Customer Support Team. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I just wanted to kind of give a brief overview of the content that is located on our knowledge pages within the portal. There are numerous documents within the portal that are going to be able to assist you with the development of your interconnection application. Each document is appropriately labeled with the correct tariff number, as well as the last time that the form was internally updated. Interconnection technical standard forms are also going to be located on this knowledge page in case you had questions about that section as well. These documents are separated by tariff tracks as well. Certain forms will be required for the simplified tariff track, while others will be needed for complex as well. These forms are also broken down by different steps in the process to clearly identify which form would be required. We currently also have a Massachusetts process page that outlines the interconnection roadmap along with the tariff timelines that are associated with specific steps and statuses. This page is broken down per tariff track, as there will be a different process in place for simplified and complex projects based on the system size. Complex projects, there are more steps and statuses that are usually involved. National Grid breaks down these topics into separate pages for more clarity on what occurs during these steps, and also identifies what documents will be necessary as well. Next slide, please. Perfect. Effective as of December 2020, a pre-application is required for system sizes 250 kW and above. The pre-application knowledge page includes a very detailed list of what is required to proceed with this stage. This includes what technical standards will need to be addressed for the pre-application, an overhead map of the site location, as well as the nearest cross streets of the proposed site interconnection. The page also includes information on how to make a pre-application payment. A pre-application payment is required per the tariff. Whether you have used the portal previously or this is your first time, there are specific knowledge pages that will help guide you while managing your interconnection project. Some of these pages include, but are not limited to, defining specific application roles, understanding portal terminology, registering for the portal, as well as how to successfully make a payment, and creating a chatter post from your case. In the instance you do run into a portal concern or an error message and part of your project, please submit an inquiry using the Contact Us button from the homepage of the NCAP portal, as shown on the right-hand side of the screen. Also located within the portal is a Massachusetts Project Guidance and Update knowledge page. The topics outlined in this page include information on ASO studies, DOER reports, previous Massachusetts seminars, and area network maps. This page is designed to truly provide direction, and notify external users of the Massachusetts updates. This includes business process updates, as well as the revised information included within the interconnection tariff. I did also want to briefly go over the electronic application form updates, specifically within the equipment selector. For every Massachusetts interconnection project, an application form is required. Within this form, the assets for the case are mandated to be entered via the equipment selector. This includes generator assets, panels, storage, and protective equipment. The Storage Assistance knowledge page outlines tutorials on how to use the equipment selector, as well as how to enter the specific assets for your project. I also wanted to quickly go over, kind of going off of what Ryan was talking about, but just how to enter your ramp rate information within the portal. When you do enter your asset, you are going to have these 4 fields here That's where you're going to enter that specific information. The ramp rate for your project would need to be entered and updated on the electronic application form as necessary. These fields are currently required for Massachusetts interconnection projects to be updated to align with the final design of your project. Protective function assets I also wanted to go over as well. They do need to be entered for your project via the equipment selector located within the application form. There are two key components to keep in mind when entering these specific protective function assets. The first component is entering the asset and ensuring that all technical and required information is entered accurately. The second component is maintaining the operating schedule that goes along with the asset as well. The following slides will show examples of how to enter the asset correctly, as well as how to enter the operating schedule. And if you wanted to get more examples or more of a tutorial on how to enter these assets after the seminar, you can also go to our storage assistance knowledge page that I had referenced previously, which is located within the NCAP portal. So this is kind of a guide, a screenshot I've provided for an example. Any protective function asset requires the information that is being requested within the cells with the red dash next to it. Although the technology subtype does not have a red dash next to it, this field is required for all applications, including the protective function asset. Please make sure for all assets that the relay ID matches what is listed on the line diagram provided. And please also ensure that you are checking off the box that says site limiting element. That box is located directly underneath the technology subtype on the right-hand side of that screen. And for protective function assets, please also ensure that the proposed set point function as well as the proposed setting are clearly defined when submitting the asset. For the set point function status, this field will always be proposed until the company deems it as approved. Operating schedules are also required, as I mentioned on the previous slide, to enter the asset. Always make sure the constant operation schedule equals no and set point function status equals proposed. Please also select a seasonal start and end date for the schedule, if applicable. If so, please also make sure to fill out the operating time description field displaying the correct settings. Operating start and end times are also required if applicable to your project. When entering time, ensure to add the leading 0 to the hour. So after you create your operating schedule for one season, you will then be required to enter another protective function asset to identify the alternate operating schedule for other seasons. The best way to accomplish this is by cloning the last operating schedule asset using the button displayed on the left. It would just be the clone button. From here, you also have the ability to modify or deactivate a protective function asset schedule or the asset itself as well. As shown on the previous slide, for the second asset defining the alternate season schedule, please ensure to fill out all required information as well as start date, and start time and end time if applicable. Once you are done entering your assets, please click the Submit Asset button as shown on the left side of the screen. And I'll be passing this off for general communications from Will.
Hey, Marissa, just before we move on to the general communications, can we go back, I think 2 or 3 slides? You mentioned something about the site limiting element checkbox. I did just want to clarify before we move on. Right there. Yeah, so that site limiting element checkbox is only for the purposes where you are trying to limit the power export capacity of the site. So you would only check that in that circumstance. I think you might have said that you check that in all circumstances. So just wanted to clarify that. And if you are checking that checkbox, that will create a new field visible on the left that allows you to identify what site or what the KWAC is that the site will be limited to. And under that circumstance, you would also have to set the operating schedule to a constant operating schedule of yes. For the other ones where you are setting a operating schedule, like Marissa mentioned, you would put the constant operating schedule to no. I just wanted to make that clarification before we moved on. But thank you, Marissa.
Of course. Thank you so much for clarifying. I appreciate it.
Hi, it's Will Kern again. I just want to touch on a couple of quick general communications before we dive into the Q&A. So just a few reminders here. Right, I think they popped up throughout the presentation, but it makes sense to mention them here again. We're obviously in our busy season. We end up connecting more here in the last 3 months of the year than we do in the prior 9. So it's important to remember, right, that what resource constraints could exist. Have conversations early and often, right? Clarify with your job owner, your estimated connected dates and those type of conversations. We are also asking to have information sent in earlier than what would be normal, just in case we do run into resource constraints as we get into the holiday in through the holiday season. So just remember, we're moving towards the end of the year, right? Getting the packages ready, stuff on the complex side around witness test documentation, those type of things. We've asked for that here in early October, and other things on a simplified or expedited side. Getting closeout packages in sort of the first week of December, also important. Also mentioned was the meter access, right? As we get into seasons where we could have snow or leaves and other those things that could be in the way, right? We just ultimately ask if you could keep those paths clear so that our meter workers can have access and also have a good working space to be working in. And winter weather, right? I mean, it's coming. We actually dealt with some hurricanes, right, in hurricane season, both up here in the Northeast and down in the southern parts of the country that dragged a few of our resources in that direction. But yeah, just keep in mind, right? I mean, that end of year date doesn't slide, but weather does happen in the meantime, could create situations that require a force majeure event. So again, we'll obviously be doing our best to make sure we do everything on time and not lose any days. But there are scenarios that do happen where we are pulled off in emergency restoration type efforts. So keep that in mind. We touched on this about 6 months ago. The next one, the kayak, the contribution in aid of construction. Right, what it includes and what it doesn't include. So just wanted to touch on this again briefly because we've seen still a number of questions here over the last several months around that. The National Grid kayak in the ISA is specific to work that National Grid will be doing or contractors that we have working directly with us who would be doing. Right, that's what's included in that. So what comes as part of the impact study, what is delivered as part of the ISA, it's only costs that will be seen and borne by National Grid. It doesn't include costs from other entities, right? Utilities, telephone companies, right? Cable companies, other attachers to poles that may have work to be done or required to transfer those poles at a later date, right? So we just want to make sure that we continue to bring that up and encourage you to reach out to those companies directly, right? We do have normal touch points, right, with them, right, as part of our normal process for any work that we ultimately do. But if for the most part, these projects, right, if we are dealing with any sort of pole work, right, any sort of reconductoring work, right, these other entities are impacted, and you should be managing that relationship directly with them and whatever costs would come out of that. We had a webinar in September, right, impromptu one. We had a number of topics that didn't make it into the July seminar. We wanted to cover those before we ended up, here in October. So we did have one on the 23rd of September. We have posted, right, the slide deck and the recording for that one, and I think we are we'll be soon posting the Q&A that came out of that session. So if you were unable to be part of that meeting last month, we encourage you to go. We have the link right there. So when these slides get posted, you should be able to have it'll all be in the same place, but you know, the link should take you back to that one to listen to those topics. And then the last thing we just want to mention, right, is around ISO battery study criteria. So what we did in working with the ISO recently was identify some of that study criteria, and we wanted to make sure that we were sharing it with everybody. So we posted it. That link's there. That's on our DG stakeholder website, the one you would go to see a lot of ASO like communication. So we wanted to add that there. So you know, we encourage everybody to go take a look at it. And we'll be trying to set something up in the future, right? That could, you know, there could be some questions that come out of that, and we want to make sure that we'll address those questions at a to be determined date. But just want to make sure everybody's aware of that posting. So with that, we will transition into questions, right? So this meeting was scheduled to go to 11:30. We, you know, power-packed presentation today overall. So we'll probably go to about 11:40. Trying to work through as many of these questions as we possibly can. We want to be conscious of everybody's time, right? As we originally had scheduled for an hour and a half. So I'll start working through these questions. We'll get as far as we can, and anything we don't get to answer today, again, we will put together that Q&A doc and get that posted to the website also, so that can be available to everybody. And just a reminder, right, that the link that we've posted here a couple times in the chat, we'll keep that open for the rest of the day, right? So if you have questions that you want to add later on, we'll get those added into the Q&A doc when we do post it. I'm gonna paraphrase some of these questions, right? Just in interest of time, right? And one of them is, can National Grid please list the cost of installing smart meters of various types in an easily accessible place so that we can accurately share that with prospective customers? So what we'll do here, both in a Q&A doc, and I think we'll drop it here in the chat now, is yes, there is a link of where that is posted, and that information is readily available. So we will get that out. So just moving quickly here. Next one, JJ, this one's for you, but it's, if a customer has a PV system with 61 kW AC inverter nameplate and is also locating significant DC coupled storage on site and installing the UL 1741 SA inverters with a UL 1741 listed power control system, can they apply for 50 kW AC interconnection through a 50 kVA single phase transformer if the PCS is programmed to not allow 50 kW AC to export to the grid?
Yes. So you can allow the output of an inverter to be derated to 50 kW AC as long as it's done by the manufacturer, and they provide a detailed curtailment letter, basically stating that it can't be adjusted by the installer or the customer. So it would have to be on manufacturer's letterhead, signed and dated by whoever the manufacturer is. And that's per the ESB 756. And to touch up on that, we also allow external power control systems. Power control system device to limit the export capacity for the overall site, as long as that device has been certified by NRTL for that purpose. And again, documentation from the NRTL certification would be needed to be submitted along with the application materials.
Great, thank you. Lorna, the next one is for you. I think you may have answered it in the presentation, but we'll give you another chance here. It says, will the frequency of allowed Schedule Z changes be increased to more than twice per year, consistent with the additional frequency of the AOBC schedule?
Yep. Hi, Will. So yes, we did, at National Grid's discretion, we did increase that to 4 times a year. We have changed the knowledge pages that were at the post interconnection tab if you go to the National Grid application portal. So that information can be found there, as well as the new forms.
Thank you. Jesse, this one, a quick hitter for you. It says for the simplified process, is the 15 kW / 25 kW cutoff for AC or DC size? Jesse, I'm not sure.
Oh, sorry, I had my
Nope.
mic up.
Okay.
So that would be for the AC side.
AC coupled, thank you.
AC, yep, and that's all I got.
Okay, perfect. JJ, next one is for you. For new three-phase PV systems that do not intend to participate in SMART, is there a requirement to relocate the utility meter to the exterior of the building to allow 24-hour access? And this one is just in the basement of the building.
So typically, anytime you touch a service, it's got to come outside. Per all ESB 750, 756, per National Grid Metering Department. There will be on occasion where if you coordinate with the metering department beforehand and they show up on site and they have if they have like ease of access to the current meter location, they will swap it, but that's on a case by case basis. 90% of the time, the metering department has you relocate them outside, group with any kind of disconnects for the PV system and the main.
Okay. Thank you. So Paul, we got one here for you. It says, will the Connected Solutions battery incentive rates be the same in 2022 through 2024 Mass Safe program?
So the battery incentive rates are the same for next year. So for 2022, actually in the history of the program, we've never lowered the incentive. The incentives might be lower in 2023 or 2024 or sometime after that. However, please remember that customers get a 5-year incentive lock for the first 5 years they participate. So customers don't have to take any kind of risk on what the incentive will be for the first 5 years. Now in the 6th year, 7th year, 8th year, customers will be incentivized at the level of the incentive at that time.
Perfect. Thank you. So the next question, again, just paraphrasing a little bit, right? There was a question around the wireless component for a wireless meter, I should say, and wondering if that charge is new. So the answer is no, right? I mean, wireless meters have been part of what we do now for several years, right? And there's obviously been an additional charge for the wireless piece of it for customers that don't have a telephone line on site or the ability to get a telephone line on site. So what we'll do as part of the Q&A doc is I think we have some links as to where that information is provided. But if there is the need or the desire for a wireless meter, there is additional charges when it comes to that. Next one is Sean. This one's for you. It says, how long should it take to receive a reply when you submit a question in the portal under the Contact Us link?
Yeah, thanks, Will. Just to clarify, so it really does depend a lot on what the type of request or question is that you're putting in there. For general inquiries that are related to the interconnection process, right now it might take about 15 to 20 days to turn around a response. For post interconnection and for certain types of requests that happen after the customer's already connected, especially if it's related to fixing an issue that occurred on a bill, or there's metering issues, or you're transferring ownership or something like that, we can potentially be taking 2 to 3 billing cycles to resolve those issues and concerns. A couple of things that can help, is to make sure that if you do have just a general question, you are searching around using the search bar, using the knowledge pages that we referenced in the presentation today to make sure that you're answering your own question with the information already available on the website, and then you don't have to wait for us to respond. For everything else, we are actively working on putting process controls in place and getting the right level of staffing to be able to respond more quickly. And in the meantime, we've been trying to prioritize any sort of requests that negatively impact customer bills and incentive payments to make sure that we're getting a response to those as quickly as we possibly can. Unfortunately, that means in the meantime, it might take a little bit longer to get to other types of requests for customers that are already connected. Also, just want to point out, alternatively, if you are in the middle of the interconnection process for an application and you already have those login credentials for the application you've submitted, it is a lot quicker in most cases to use the chatter functionality using the @ symbol to tag, your case owner and getting a response that way, instead of using the contact us, which sends it to a general queue that we then have to work through and try to find. So just a couple of quick tips there, making sure that we try to get to you as quick as we can. And then I guess just finally, if you are using the contact us form, do make sure that you're putting in the billing account number. If you do have login credentials, make sure you've logged in before you click on that contact us form button. And if you do have a specific application case that the request is related to, make sure to enter that on the form as well. All those things can really help us direct the request to the right person and get you an answer as quickly as possible.
Great, thanks, Sean. JJ, this is the last question on our list, so we'll finish up with this one. So the question is, if a simplified application, 25 kW 3-phase, is located on a circuit that A, has hosting capacity available according to the hosting capacity maps, and B, has an ongoing ASO study, will it likely be allowed to interconnect? Will it be required to have a supplemental review or impact study performed?
And so yes, any simplified case, 25 kW 3-phase or single phase, they are not subject to an impact study or to be held behind any ongoing ASO study. Supplemental review will be determined depending on if the system modifications are required to interconnect. So if you're trying to interconnect a 25 kW 3-phase system and we require to install a new 3-phase bank, a supplemental review might be required to have the design engineering to get out into the field, study it further, estimate things like that. But it would not be subject to an impact study.
Great, thank you. All right, so that's the end of the questions. So just to reiterate again, right, the form or the link to the form is still there and available. We're happy to continue to monitor it. It'll be open the rest of the day. And I will take those questions and we'll incorporate them into a Q&A doc that we will post at a later date. We did manage to get through, I think, all the questions that were submitted here. So, we're about 8 minutes over, so I apologize for the extra time, but we managed to get through them all. We can just go to the next slide real quick. We'll close it out with, so we will have this page of links as part of the slide deck as it's posted. So just so everybody knows that that it's there and can utilize those. And also we will have this posted and the recording up by the end of the day today, it looks like. So Q&A doc will obviously follow a little bit later, but we should have this right, the verbal answers to those questions in addition to the slide deck will be up today. So again, thank you for everybody who was able to come and join us for a few extra minutes. We appreciate it, and our next regularly scheduled seminar will be in April of 2022. But keep an eye out. We do intend on doing some additional webinars here over the next few months of pertinent topics. But we will get those out to everybody as they get planned and scheduled, and we'll work towards a lot of interconnections here towards the end of 2021. But thank you for joining, and have a great rest of the day.